Hey everyone, this is Wild and Woolly Gaming coming to you today to bring you what I think of as pretty bad news and probably quite a bad idea on Gaijin's part. So, essentially, what's going to happen is after 2 weeks from today, so near the end of the month of August, we will see a brand new patch, patch 1.91. But with that patch, there will be some major changes for the German ground tree. And those changes are that the mouse tank will no longer be able to be researched and purchased, as well as the Panther 2, Tiger 10.5 centimeter gun, and the Coelian tank, or anti-aircraft tank. So, big changes. I can see this, as especially coming later today, as more people hear the news. People will be quite upset about it. And, yeah. So, luckily for me, I researched the German tree first and foremost, being that that was the tree that always interested me the most. But other people have not done that, and so basically, if you already purchased and researched these tanks, or I think it's just if you've already researched the tanks, you'll be able to keep them. And they've actually said research them within 2 weeks, or even just start researching them, and you will be able to keep these tanks, and you'll be set. That'll be fine. However, if you've not, or maybe if you're close to being able to research them, but you don't have the time, or whatever the case may be, you won't be able to research them in the future, which is quite bad. So I know for me, when I first got this tank, or when I first got this game, and wanted to, in even World of Tanks, sorry for saying that, but I used to play World of Tanks before this game. Clearly, this is, in my opinion, a superior game, but the mouse was the big draw, you know. It was a big deal for me, and I really loved the concept of it. Implemented in game and even real life, obviously, it wouldn't have been an incredible tank, but it still has some major uses, and as you'll see in this video, it's ridiculously armored. But beside the point. So they're making it just so, again, that you're not able to research them. They said, be possibly bringing back the mouse tank as a premium or as an event vehicle, collectible vehicle, which is cool and all, but they're taking something that's already in the game and they're going to limit the sale of it. And that's strange to me. This tank did exist. They claim it's a paper tank, and of course it likely was not used operationally, but there are claims that it was used more or less as a bunker against the Russians in the Battle of Berlin. I don't think those claims are true, but there it is. So what you're essentially getting is you're getting things taken away from me, and in my opinion, they've already opened Pandora's box. These tanks are already here, and one of the reasons why they're taking them away is because when they were initially implemented, and they specifically mentioned the King Tiger 10.5C, it's that it was meant as more or less a stopgap. So this was at a point when modern tanks were not implemented, when modern ammo types were not in the game. This is when, other tanks, other countries really had comparably good tanks, and the Germans were at a lack of firepower. So they added the 10.5 centimeter gun onto the King Tiger kind of as a stopgap. And as they've become more rigid in their decision making, they've gotten rid of that stopgap. Or they're now deciding to do so. I can see why, but at the same time, again, they've opened Pandora's box. It's just kind of an odd decision, especially when all this fixed War Thunder talk is going on right now. How a lot of people are already pretty disenfranchised and disenchanted with this game. Now they're taking away some of the player favorite vehicles from being able to be researched. Let's say if, for example, you were a big fan of American tanks and that's what you primarily researched. Now all of a sudden you can't research the mouse, unless you start researching it in the next 2 weeks. If you were a big fan of Russians, whatever other nations, or maybe you're just breaking into tanks, now it's impossible to research the mouse, or after a few weeks, the mouse, Panther 2, Coelian and the King Tiger 10.5C, which is, in my opinion, just that's a little crazy. The mouse again was a big draw for me to even play these games. And reality is oftentimes worse than what you had in mind, and the mouse tank isn't really incredible in this game facing modern ammo types. I mean, the amount of times I get one-shotted or my crew becomes largely disabled is pretty high, but it's a very fun tank to still play. It's fun to when you do get deflections and all that. It's fun to see it, and now you can't. This will essentially kind of become like an E100 or whatever the case may be, in that you will not see it as often, and that's really kind of their goal. So what I'm going to do now is kind of show you exactly um, what I'm talking about in regards to exactly what they said. And I'm going to include some screenshots here for you. So essentially, what they're doing is they're not just getting rid. I mean, they are getting rid of the tanks, the vehicles, but they're replacing them, and they're not really replacing them with great, you know, I guess you could say replacements. So they're getting rid of the Flak Panzer, the Coelian, and replacing it with an Ostwind 2. They're getting rid of the Panther 2 and also the mouse, and essentially they're replacing them with M48 variants. And that to me is just crazy. They're also upping the M48A2 GA2 with a better shell, but now they're gonna raise the BR on it. So they're they're getting rid of a lot of these borderline, 7 to 8 BR tanks, and guess what? Now they're gonna just be kind of getting rid of all those middle tanks. What are they gonna replace them with? Who knows? But no longer will we have the option of even having them. And again, I'm not faulting Gaijin for their logic here. The mouse is really a difficult tank to play, especially when it's being up-tiered. It's easily destroyable, and its gun is sometimes ineffective. It takes a long time to reload, especially when facing higher-tier opponents, and I get that. But again, they've already opened Pandora's box. I mean, this was a main draw to the game, and it did exist. It was not a paper tank. It did exist, albeit in prototype form, but it was there. The Tiger 2 10.5C, I can see why they might get rid of that, but again, they've opened Pandora's box. It's already in the game. It's kind of a strange thing for them just to get rid of it. It was, again, just kind of implemented as a stopgap, as you can see here, but it was never really, I don't know, it's an actually useful tank in this game. And again, for them to get rid of it is just kind of an odd decision for me, especially with all this controversy surrounding the game in the first place. So the Panther 2 is another victim of this upcoming change, and I could see exactly why they might get rid of it. It was never fully completed. The chassis does exist, and actually it's, I believe, in the Patton or the Fort Knox Tank Museum. So it did exist in part, but the specs used in the game are kind of a bit off. So 8.8, it shouldn't have the 8.8 centimeter gun, rather the 7.5, or maybe an upgraded version of the 7.5 if I'm not mistaken. But either way, it's in the game, and in my opinion, it's a big part of ground forces. For them to get rid of it at this point is just kind of, I don't know, it doesn't really make a ton of sense. I could see why they might want to, but again, Pandora's box is there. Coelian, I could see why they might want to get rid of it. Not as many people play anti-air. I'm not as fervent of a supporter of that tank in particular, but at the same token, I can see why they might get rid of it. It wasn't really a tank, and again, it was issued by Gaijin more or less as a stopgap, but again, the whole Pandora's box argument, slippery slope, it's already in the game. And there's some people who I'm sure actually wanted that tank. I know there's a lot of people who look at the Panther 2 and say, wow, I love Panther tanks. The Panther 2 is amazing. I'm going to work on the Germans. Now, I can almost guarantee you that this change is going to reduce some people's, want in playing this game. People will want to play this game less, or new people might not have the incentive to play it because some of their favorite tanks, Panther 2 and Mouse in particular, are going to be going by the wayside. They will not be achievable, they will not be obtainable unless they unlock them in certain events. So more or less in summation here, yeah, War Thunder. I think you're making a pretty big mistake, especially with all this controversy going on right now. I'm sure this plan has been in effect for quite some time now, but what does this mean for the future? So there's other planes. One that I made a video on that I was actually quite excited about potentially being in the game, and you'd mentioned it in a really old post from like 5 or 6 years ago. The ME262 HG1 and even the HG2, you had mentioned that as being almost definite as being in the game. Now they probably won't because, I mean, I guess the HG1 flew, kind of like the mouse existed, but was it operational? No, it wasn't. You know, in much the same way, the HG2 possibly flew, but was it operational? No. I mean, you could make the same argument for the Horton 229. That never flew operationally. It existed in three prototypes of varying types. I mean, they weren't even all the same each prototype. I believe the V2 or the V3 was more or less considered the most likely to enter service, but they never entered service. They never fought, nor did the Dornier 335. As far as I know, that never fought in combat. There was one alleged altercation with I believe it was a Tempest that couldn't catch it. It was at treetop, but hey, guess what? That never flew. Why don't you take that away as well? I mean, there's so many German tanks and even Allied tanks and vehicles, just in general, that never really took part in operations or even training. What's the future for those? You know, they're already in the game. Are you just going to be adding more variants of the same vehicles? Is America going to be the main arms producer for this game? I mean, you got to think about it like that because so many foreign, especially post World War II tanks, are just American tanks. You know, West German tanks are American tanks. With the exception of the Leopard, you know, and the variants thereof, they're all American tanks. So is every country just going to have the same American tanks, just variants of them? I don't know, Gaijin. This is a real tough decision. A real, I don't know why you're doing it. I mean, I kind of know why, but I don't think it's a good idea. The Pandora's box is already open. Focus on just making tanks. You know, just focus on making tanks. You know, and planes for countries rather than taking them away and substituting them with variants, import variants. So either way, as you can tell, I'm kind of a little bit salty about this. I already have these tanks, but I want other people to have them too. They're cool tanks. And vehicles, there's going to be vehicles in general. It's just going to be vehicles in general, airplanes, tanks, maybe helicopters. So either way, guys, that's the end of my rant. Hope you guys have a good day.